All right, y'all. It's time. It's everyone's favorite video to watch at the end of the year, which is everyone's top favorite books of 2025. I have a total of 12 books here because I couldn't narrow it down to a top 10. Overall, I read 67 books this year, which I am very pleased with because there were months that I didn't read it all. As you guys know, I took a hiatus from YouTube at the end of last year. So I'm just happy to be here and say that I couldn't narrow it down. I only have, yeah, I have 12. I couldn't even get to 10. So it was a great reading year, but I won't jibber jabber. Let's get right into the video. Hey y'all, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, Scotty Cherie Reads. So I have 12 books here and surprise, surprise, I actually was able to rank them. So I'm gonna start at number 12, which is still a fantastic read, and go all the way up to my number one favorite book of the year. As always, grab a drink and let's get right into number 12. Coming in strong at number 12 was one of my biggest surprises of the year because I had read this author's previous debut, Nightcrawling, and it was just okay. I feel like the ending of that book really kind of peeved me a little bit, but I did want to give this author another chance, and surprise, surprise, she's actually at number 12, and for good reason. And that book was The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. This book was very surprising to me because the premise just seems so kind of simple and in a rural part of the world, and just seemed like it was going to be a little slow paced, but the characters is what really brought me into this book. It's hard for me to say if I'm a plot or character driven reader, but I would say I lean a little bit more towards plot, I would say. And this one is very much more heavily like character heavy. So let's just get into the synopsis a bit. Our main character, Adela Woods, is 16 years old and pregnant, and her parents figure this out and they're like, absolutely not. You have a lot ahead of you. You're gonna go to college. You're a great swimmer. We expect you to like go to the Olympics. Like, you're gonna go and live with your grandma in Florida to have this baby and then give it away to someone else. So it starts off right there, and Adela ends up going to Florida and she meets this group of girls who are all either pregnant or they're teenage moms already. And this book has three different perspectives, which I really enjoyed. I was very invested in all three. So a lot of the times when there's multiple POVs, you're drawn more to one than the other, but I was equally intrigued with all three. I didn't get bored at all, which was fascinating and made this a really fast read. So the other perspectives are Emery, and she just had a baby, a newborn, and she's kind of bringing the newborn to high school and just trying to keep pushing because she wants to graduate despite all the odds. And then there's also Simone, who's a mother of 4-year-old twins, and she's discovered that she's pregnant again. And she's kind of the leader of this group of girls where they all kind of hang out in this rural spot by the beach. And they just all support each other because they're all kind of outcasts from society because they're teenage moms. And that concept is just great. And I think Layla Motley did a fantastic job of explaining that dynamic and what it would feel like to be a teenage girl, but having it feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. The relationships not only between the girls, but also between other male figures that I'm not going to go into too much, was very interesting. And I was just captivated in what was going to happen to not only Adela, but all of the other girls in this book. The ending was really fascinating. I cried for sure. And yeah, so this comes in at number 12. If you're interested in this, definitely pick it up. I like this far more than I like Nightcrawling, and I'm very excited to see what Layla Motley puts out next. Coming in at number 11, I have a nonfiction read that blew me away when listening to it on an audiobook, and that is Everything is Tuberculosis, The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection by none other than John Green. So if you don't know, John Green is actually from Indiana, go Hoosiers, and he wrote, I think what put him on the map, even though a lot of his young adult books are very popular, it was The Fault in Our Stars, which took the world by storm. The movie did really well, and he's sitting pretty on the money that he's made from these books, and his YouTube channel with his brother Hank is really cool. The Vlog Brothers, I'll have all that stuff linked below. But What's awesome about this book and what makes me really like John Green is that this is a millionaire who's made a lot of money and is using his voice to platform others and to bring change to the world. I don't really want to get into too many details about this because it's a fairly short book. It's under 200 pages, which is kind of his demise, but we'll get into it. But John Green got really, really fascinated with tuberculosis. And he spent a lot of time since like 2019 where he met this young boy named Henry. Actually, yeah, young boy, Henry, I think he was like 12, 13. I'll put it down here how old he was when John Green met him at a hospital. And he has tuberculosis. And John Green just has become fascinated with it. He talks about the history and the intrigue of tuberculosis back in the day and how tuberculosis has been weaving into random ordinary things in our life, things even as simple as like cowboy hats. And he explains how tuberculosis has affected our lives in just such mundane ways, as I've said. That's the best way I can explain this. But he also focuses on the fact that we have a cure for tuberculosis. However, in poverty-torn countries, they don't have the same access. So there are still millions and millions of people who are dying from this curable disease. And it's just really messed up. And John Green is advocating to make that change happen. And with bringing this book to the forefront, I feel like people just pick it up even if they're not intrigued or normally wouldn't read like a science-heavy nonfiction book. But because it's John Green, I feel like a lot of people have given it a chance and have learned a lot about tuberculosis and then can then help change the world so that this disease can stay curable and we can get the cure to poverty-worn countries like Sierra Leone. So, yeah, it was intriguing. It's only at number 11, only because I wish that it was longer. There are a lot of reference points and other books that John Green has put there if you want to dive a bit deeper, and I should do that because I would like to dig a bit deeper. I understand why he kept it short because it's very approachable and intriguing for other people, but I have a science background and I know quite a bit about tuberculosis and, it seemed a little surface level, but I get it. It's very approachable to the average layman, and I think it was fantastic. So if you're really interested, and if not, maybe just give it a chance. It's a quick read, and I think it's very important. At number 10, we have our first horror. There are quite a few horror books on this list because, as I've stated, I read a lot of horror this year, and this was my first book by this author. Even though it's not their debut, it was just new to me, and I can't wait to pick up more by Nat Cassidy. I read When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy, and I can't stop thinking about this book. This is probably the most fun that I had reading a book. Like, I would sit down and just be so engrossed in this. It's almost like an adventure story that happens throughout here, which normally I'm not really a big fan of, but it is insanely plot heavy. Like, very plot heavy. I feel like some people might not like it because of that, because it is like from one adventure to the next adventure to the next adventure. But for some reason, it really, really worked for me. I think it's because I was also connected to the relationship between the characters. I don't think that the characters individually captivated me, but I think that by the end of the story, the backstory of these characters and the reasons why they're doing things that they're doing and the bond between the main character and the young boy was really captivating and moving for me. Okay, before I get any further, let me just read the flap because this is a book that I think is best to go into only knowing what's on the cover. As you can tell, there's a wolf on here. It's When the Wolf Comes Home, but this is not a typical werewolf story the way that it's kind of marketed in a very genius way. So, it says, one night, Jess, a struggling actress, finds a 5-year-old runaway hidden in the bushes outside her apartment. After a violent, bloody encounter with the boy's father, she and the boy find themselves running for their lives. As they attempt to evade the boy's increasingly desperate father, horrifying events of butchery follow them. At first, Jess thinks she understands what they're up to, but she's about to learn that there's more to this surreal and grisly events than she's ever imagined, and that when the wolf finally comes home, no one will be spared. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. The ending of this book, a horror book, made me cry, which is very random and weird. Like, I like literary horror, but I definitely wasn't expecting from this very fast paced, fun book to be rocked as much as I was at the end of this book. And then I was hit double time because Nat Cassidy in his books, he always has a pretty long afterword about why he wrote the book. And it's very, very personal. And I could relate to a lot of these things that he talked about in regards to fathers and relationship with fathers. And yeah, I don't know. If you are intrigued, I think everyone should read this book. It's not very long, but you'll finish it in a day or two. It's that captivating. Yeah, I can't wait to pick up another book by Nat Cassidy. I know there's Nestlings and Mary. Let me know in the comments below which one I should start with because I definitely want to pick up one very, very shortly. We have another horror coming in at number 9, and this is my first book by this author, even though this is not their debut, kind of same thing as the last one, and that is Mr. Percival Everett. This was my first book, The Trees by Percival Everett, and obviously, as you can tell, since it's on this list, I adored it. I can't wait to pick up another read by him because I absolutely gobbled this book up. This book is pretty heavy, even though it's weird because there are some funny parts in here. Like Percival Everett's humor is unlike anything I've read before, and I can't wait to see what he does in other books because even though the subject matter, which we'll get into in one second, is insanely heavy, there are parts that I was laughing out loud. Basically, this is taking place in Mississippi, and we're following these two detectives who are coming around because they realize that someone was murdered. And when they get there, there happens to be like a second body that's unexplainably there. And it weirdly is super relatable or very reminiscent of Emmett Till's body. So it starts from there. Obviously, if we're talking about Emmett Till, it's going to be a pretty heavy read. But then this keeps happening all over the nation where people say that there's the second body that's there that looks like Emmett Till, and then it's not really there. So there's this mysterious element, maybe supernatural element. Is it supernatural? What's going on? And the mystery unfolds from there. And yeah, I had so much fun with this. Once we got towards the end, I was starting to figure out what was going on. I didn't know immediately, like from the beginning of the book, but at a certain point, I feel like the way that it was spelled out, it was becoming pretty obvious of what the twist was. So I feel like that's the only reason why it's a little bit lower down on this list, but still great. As you can tell, I tabbed a bunch. There's one part in this book that I'm not going to spoil, but if you know, you know, it's on page 185, chapter 64. That just hit me very hard. And I've heard that like even when you listen to the audiobook, it just hits you even more so. And I don't know, I'm just impressed by Percival Everett, and I'm glad that he put that in there because it really doubled down on the point that he was trying to make in this book. But yeah, again, let me know what Percival Everett I should read next. I know he has Erasure, and I'll put a couple other ones that I've heard before, but yeah, steer me in the right direction for the next book because this was so good. All right, coming in at number 8 was kind of a surprise for me because I didn't know anything about this story, even though it's been around for quite a while and it's like literally a pop culture reference. And I'm talking about The Stepford Wives by Era 11. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that, but this tiny little book like rocked my October. I dug so deep. I watched both of the movie adaptations. I was watching like behind the scenes stuff from the director's standpoint for why they made the changes in the movie versus the book, and it just became my identity for a couple of weeks. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. And then went right into Rosemary's Baby after this, which is another book that Era 11 wrote. Spoiler alert, that one's not on this list, but still very great. The premise, if you don't know, I'll make it pretty quick. We follow Joanna and her husband and their kids as they move to this new town called Stepford. And when they get there, things just seem a little too perfect. And Joanna is kind of trying to figure out what is going on. And that's all I want to say. I think the ending of this, I was captivated from the psychological suspense of what was going on, if things were real, if they weren't, if Joanna was just kind of crazy, if we could trust her, XYZ. And then by the end, I just wasn't expecting that twist. I wasn't expecting that at all. And yeah, I think the writing in here was awesome. I can't wait to reread it and tab it up. Because I annotate my books, but I was just so sucked in from the beginning that I didn't even stop. I read it in literally one sitting. So yeah, this was a 5-star read for me. And yeah, it came in at number 8 on my list. I did want to say, as I've said in other videos, if you want me to do a comparison video between this and the other 2 movies, just let me know in the comments below. I know it's a bit of an older book, so I don't know if anyone's kind of fascinated with that because I'm probably like late to the game, but I think it'd be fun. And yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's other people out there who are as fascinated with this as I am. So yeah, let's get to the next one. At number 7, we have yet another horror, and this comes from the author who wrote my number 1 favorite book of 2024, which was The Reformatory. Shout out, if you haven't read that, go read it. But I read The Good House by Tanana Reeve Dew this year, and this was also fantastic. I like The Reformatory a bit more, but this still is coming in at number 7 on this list, and I suggest this to anyone and everyone. Tanana Reeve Dew can do no wrong. I say it all the time. I'm taking my time through her books because they're just, yeah, I just love them so much and just don't want them ever to end. I mean, I know that she is still with us and still writing books, but just savoring each novel has been so fun. They're just so deep. This one is really big. Like, it's almost 500 pages. And if you can't tell, that font is pretty small. So it took me some time to get through, but I'm glad that I did because it's a book that you want to sit with and not fly through. Anyway, I'm going to read the summary on the back because I don't want to spoil it. It's been a while since I've read it, and yeah, I just don't want to give any spoilers away. It says, the home that belonged to Angela Toussaint's late grandmother is so beloved that townspeople of Sacagawea, Washington, call it the Good House. But that all changes one summer when an unexpected tragedy takes place behind its closed doors, and the Toussaint's family history and future is dramatically transformed. Angela has not returned to the Good House since her son Corey died there 2 years ago. I thought that would have been a spoiler, but if it's on the back of the book, I guess it happened early enough in, but whatever. We're going to keep going quickly. But now, Angela is finally ready to return to her hometown and go beyond the grave to unearth the truth about Corey's death. Could it be related to a terrifying entity Angela's grandmother battled 7 decades ago? And what about the other senseless calamities that Sacagawea has seen in recent years? Has Angela's grandmother, an African-American woman reputed to the powers, put a curse on the entire community? A thrilling exploration of secrets, lies, and divine inspiration, The Good House will haunt readers long after its chilling conclusion. Yeah. Chilling conclusion, because I was rocked at the end of this book, but Tanana Reeve's writing is just so captivating. I understand that some people say it was a bit much in this book because it is very detail heavy, but I think it's done intentionally. The way Tanana Reeve Dew writes about trauma and generational trauma and how that affects not only you, but everyone else around you and future folks in your family, it's just done so well. Some parts in this book really scared me. Like, I was reading this at night and I, had to turn the light on for a second. There were parts, especially towards the end, that I had to shut the book because it was just a little too heavy for me and, sit and have a little bit of a cry and put it down and come back to it the next day. But this was an emotional roller coaster. This is a book that, I don't know if you could read it for book club because it's a pretty long read, but it's one that you would like to find other people who have read it to talk about it because the themes in this book, you can dive deep and deep and deep and deeper with it. So I hope I sold you on this. I don't know if I did a good job, but trust me, it is a classic for a reason. Please pick it up if you haven't. It's so good. All right, we're changing it up at number 6 with a contemporary, and that is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. And I read this, I believe, in January this year, January or February of 2025, and it stuck with me and made it all the way to number 6 on my top 12 list. I'm not going to say much about it. This is a first book in a trilogy, and I've only read the first book so far. I don't know why I didn't continue with the other one, so I feel like I remember quite a bit and I've tabbed it quite a bit that I hope that I can just go through with the tabs and be reminded of everything that happened in the first book before going to the second book. But anyway, let's get into the summary. So ultimately, we're in this small town in, where's Beartown? I don't know. I guess not important, but we're following this hockey team that is doing insanely well in this small town. And so everyone in this town is rooting and cheering for these boys. And in the midst of, I believe it's like the national semifinals for this hockey league, the town is now ripped apart a bit because there is a story that's come out about a girl who was violently traumatized, and it kind of splits the town in two. It talks about secrets, it talks about loyalty, it talks about how people in high power or celebrities of a town can potentially get away with violent acts. Yeah, has a lot of deep themes, very intriguing. I do want to read the first like chapter, which is just one page, to show how page turning this book is. It starts chapter 1. Late one evening toward the end of March, a teenager picked up a double-barreled shotgun, walked into the forest, put the gun to someone else's forehead, and pulled the trigger. This is the story of how we got there. So yeah, a lot goes on in this book. There's a lot of drama. The relationships between the people in this book are very intriguing. I can't wait to continue with my boy Benji into the next book. So yeah, if you haven't read Frederick Bachman or at all, I think Beartown's a good place to start. And yeah, pick it up. We made it to the top 5, and of course, we're getting right back into horror, and we're gonna start with a little novella that blew me away. And coming in at number 5 is A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen L. Peck. This story is literally only 100 pages, and this has stuck with me so much this year. A quick synopsis: we follow our main character, Soren Johansson, who is a Mormon, and at the very beginning, we realize that he has died and he goes to hell. However, this is not the hell that he would have imagined it to be. There's some jokes that are in there, but basically he meets this like demon being, and you get a bit more information of what that demon is in the story. I'm not going to go into too many details about that, but this demon then casts each individual person into their own hell. And our main character, Soren's hell, is this infinite library, and he has a task where he has to find the story that contains, or the book that contains the story of his entire life. So what's weird is that this hell is not forever. Once he finds the book that tells the story of his life, then he can go off to whatever. It's not really explained. Heaven, whatever a better situation is. But this book really tackles what infinity means and like how vast space and time can be. And yeah, so basically in this library, he has to find the book that tells the story of his life, like I said. But if you pick up one book, it can be all A's. You can pick up another book, it could be A, B. It can have symbols. And so you can imagine the layout and formation of all of the letters for it to make sense for it to be your specific life story. And so every day he just gets up and that's his task, to go and wander with these other people and find his book. But by the end of this book, I've said it before, when I finished this book, I literally just like dropped it and just like sat and stared into space and just was like, what is anything? What does anything mean? One of those mindfuck books, but in the best way possible. If you haven't heard of this book, I hadn't heard of it until I saw it for the secret vlog, for the Read Your Color vlog that I didn't ultimately end up doing. All the information will be listed below, but I wish more people will talk about this book. So yeah, pick this short book up and chat with me in the comments with no spoilers once you've read it, because this is, yeah, mind-boggling. At number 4, I have another horror that I need to thank my friend Robin at Robin Reads for pushing me to pick this up, because as you see, it came in at number 4 in my top reads of this year. and that is Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I am going to read the back of this book. It's a pretty short blurb because I have a problem because I feel like people ruin the twist in this book. Even though I understand that once you start reading this book, it's pretty easy to figure out what the twist is going to be, but I don't like that people spoil it, when they're explaining or giving a summary about this book. So I'm going to read what the publisher and the author put on the back, and then we're going to go from there. So it says, Rosemary meets Ash at the farmer's market. Ash, precise, pretty, and practically perfect, sells bars of soap and delicate pastel colors, sprinkle spackled cupcakes stacked on scallop stands, beeswax candles, jelly jars of honey, and glossy green plants. Ro has never felt this way about another woman. With Ash, she wants to be her and to have her in equal measure. But as her obsession with Ash consumes her, she may find she's not the only one doing the devouring. Told in lush, delicate prose, this is a deliciously dark tale of passion taking an unsavory turn. So I don't know if you can tell, even just from the blurb in the back, the prose is what really captivated me with this book. So, like I said, even though I knew what the twist was going to be, because it was spoiled for me, and I feel like I probably would have guessed it before the halfway point of this short book, I was still just in love with the writing and the relationship between Rosemary and Ash. And I was still propelled to read this book to see exactly what was going to happen at the end. I had an idea of how we were going to get there, but I didn't know exactly what was going to unfold. And it was a bigger bang than I thought that it was going to be, for sure. So I know that's kind of vague. It's a weird book. It's one of those weird girl lit horror books, but I loved it. This was my first book by Delilah S. Dawson, and I can't wait to pick up something else. I know a lot of people have put Guillotine on their favorite books of the year this year, which I've seen, so maybe I'll pick that one up next. But yeah, Bloom came in all the way at number 4 for me this year. Top 3, top 3, top 3. And at number 3, surprise, another horror. But this is one of my most recent reads that I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I'm currently going through reading the top 10 books. And that book, surprisingly, The Lamb by Lucy Rose, which is a debut, which I can't believe it. If you can't see, I loved this book. The writing in this book, yeah, I don't know how they took the theme of this book, which is cannibalism, which is not a spoiler because I'm going to read the inside flap. It says that they eat humans or the strays. I couldn't believe that a book about cannibalism left me with so many emotions, and I literally shed tears in this book, which is wild. Very much literary horror, but yeah, it's not going to be for everyone, but it was very, very much so for me. Quickly, we basically follow Margot and Mama, and they live in a forest. They're just by themselves in this little cottage. And as the flap says, not a spoiler, it says that Mama calls these strangers who knocks on their door strays. And when strays come, it's an exciting time because they feed them wine and a bunch of food, and then they eat them. However, one day there's a stray that comes up named Eden, and Eden kind of changes everything moving forward. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say. If you think you can stomach it, because obviously if it's about cannibalism, there's going to be a lot of body horror. They do not shy away from any of the verbiage of eating humans. So, and they do it quite a bit. And it might get a little redundant, but yeah, it was for me. The ending, the relationships, Margot is going to stay in my heart for so long. I don't see a lot of people talking about this or loving it as much. I know people were talking about it because obviously it's like a taboo thing, like it's about cannibalism, but I didn't see as many people rate it as highly as I did. This was a 5-star read for me. I can't wait to reread it. Yeah, I'm interested to see where this is going to fall in my Goodreads ranking because, spoiler alert, I'm loving a lot of the top 10 horrors for the Goodreads 2025 awards, but this is very high up there, and we'll see. Look out for that video at the end of this month, but yeah, coming in at number 3, top 3, The Lamb by Lucy Rose. All right, so number 3 was Sorry, Hugo. Number 3, The Lamb, was the last horror book, so this was the top horror read of 2025, which was awesome. So again, pick it up. But coming in at number 2 is an insanely, insanely heavy read, but insanely imperative, important for people to pick up. And that is Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice by Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Okay, so I listened to this book on audiobook and it took me a while to get through because it is very heavy. If you don't recognize the name Virginia Roberts Giuffre, let me remind you that she is the most outspoken victim of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's insane abuse that is all over the internet and has been for a while now, finally. Even though the trial in this case is a whirlwind and it's very infuriating. But Virginia lays it all out. She gives her whole story in this book. And what's so sad is that not only does she talk about how she was groomed and grabbed from to be put into this sex trafficking world with Epstein and Maxwell, but this poor girl dealt with trauma since she basically came out of the womb. And unfortunately, what makes this even more of a difficult read than what I've already explained is that in 2025, I think right before this book released, Virginia actually took her own life. She had a family, she had kids, and there are points in this book where she talks about how she has struggled with self-harming thoughts, where she has attempted taking her life before. And at certain points in this book, it seems like it's very optimistic and it's going to get better. And you just know in the back of your brain that, it got to a point where she couldn't take it anymore and she is no longer with us. So be aware, look at the trigger warnings, because even though if you know what happens with Epstein and Maxwell victims, that whole story, there's still even more abuse that you would be surprised about in this book. So, take your time with it, but I think that we all, can do a solid to, Virginia's legacy and the other victims and read this book and be talking about it because this story is just deeply sad. It's very well written, it's very personal, it's very deep. I think Virginia put her heart and soul into this book, and yeah, I have to put it out there. And like I said, it's number 2 for a reason here. And yeah, I haven't heard enough people talking about it, so please pick it up. Listen to it on audiobook, get a physical copy, do whatever you need to do, and, come and chat with me afterwards about this because it is a tough read, but I'm here to kind of gab about, why this book is so important. But yeah, we'll leave it at number 2. Number 1 will be a little more uplifting. We've made it, y'all. My favorite book of the year is none other than Toni Morrison. And somehow, my number 1 book out of 67 books that I've read this year is under 50 pages. And that is Recitative by, like I said, Toni Morrison. You can read, I've read this book, I think, 4 times this year. And the point of this book is to talk about race. So we have our main character, Twyla and Roberta, and they've known each other since they were 8 years old, and they were in this houseless shelter. And life kind of goes on, they grow apart, but then later in life, they kind of see each other again at a diner, again at a grocery store, again at a protest. And they seem like they're kind of on opposite ends of every problem or agreement that they have. And in the flap here, it says that Morrison says that one character is white and one character is black, but she never ever, even in history before she passed away, never really told anyone who the person was because of the point. Who each race was Tyler black or was Twyla white? Was Roberta black or was Roberta white? And you can talk this book to death for hours, and someone can explain. I can say I think 100% Twyla's back, and someone will give me reasons why they think she's white, and I will sit there and ponder and be like, you might be right. And that is the beauty. I don't understand how Morrison has done this experiment so well. It says Morrison herself describes this story as, quote, an experiment in the removal of all racial codes from a narrative about 2 characters of different races for whom racial identity is crucial, end quote. If you haven't picked this book up, please read it and read it in one sitting, and then read it again, and then come back to me and let me know who you thought was black, who you thought was white, and just also talk about how no one writes like this woman. No one writes like this woman. Like I said, I was going to start this year with reading Toni Morrison in publication order each month, but I quickly realized that I needed to not do that because her books are just so fantastic. And unfortunately, she's not with us anymore. So there's a finite number of Toni Morrison books, and I want to sit with them a bit longer. In 2026, I'm thinking about reading one quarterly, so every 4 months, having a discussion about it. And yeah, this wasn't in publication order. I don't exactly remember why I picked this up. I don't know if it was for a book club. I'm not sure, but I read this one out of order, and yeah, it blew me away. Blew me away. Yeah, that's all I can say. I literally don't even have words. Just read it, and this is always going to be a favorite book of absolute all time for me, for sure. Wow. Those are my 12 favorite books of 2025. If you've read any of these books, please let me know in the comments, whether if you like them like me or if you dislike them. I love discussion either way. Also, please leave a comment down below of what your number one favorite read was for 2025. I'm always looking for great books to add to my never-ending TBR. And if it happens to be a book that I own already, I might prioritize it for my reads for this year, 2026. But that's it, y'all. As always, if you like what you saw here, please subscribe if you haven't before. And my next video will be my worst books and most disappointing reads of 2025. So let's chat in the comments until that's released in a couple days. Talk soon, y'all. Thanks for being here. Bye.